Hello there, and welcome to yet another episode of Know Your Laws, where we talk on matters to do with law, justice, and legal affairs, always to educate you, help you, and learn new laws. And on this week's episode, we focus on construction laws, what you need to know before beginning any construction. And now to join me in that discussion is my guest, who is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, Bruno Situma. Welcome to the program, Bruno.
Thank you very much for hosting me, Chris. I'm happy to be here.
And glad to see you again
after a long time. Yeah, sure.
I think I've just introduced a very critical part of the law, and is one of the least known laws in the country, as well as the least understood in terms of the construction laws, with so many acts in the law and guiding the procedure in which construction should be done. Let's just begin here. What would we refer as construction?
Generally, I think any development in infrastructure will be categorized to mean construction. But as you clearly point out that there are a lot of gray areas, or rather people don't make a lot of effort to understand construction laws in this country. So I think, like I would rightly put it, this will be a good place to discuss such laws. Yeah.
And just to begin right from the start, of course, I mentioned construction being, a developing infrastructure and being something that happens on different places on daily occasions, in that you find a building has been constructed. What does the Kenyan law stipulate in regards to, the construction process right from the start to its management and also regulation?
One thing that I would point out about construction laws is the fact that before 2014, 2015, there were a lot of gray areas in construction, and that was caused by the fact that we had very many laws, or rather statutory provisions, acts of parliament that provided guidance on how to go about construction. But with the establishment of the National Construction Authority Act, that's number 41 of 2014, a lot of those issues were brought under one act. So that made it easier because, first of all, there was the establishment of an authority that put its efforts entirely on issues related to construction, which previously was done through what we used to call a multi-agency network. But now they put a lot of powers to this authority for purposes of ensuring that at least there is regulations, and the rest of the agencies that contributed to construction basically did what I would call backup roles. So everything would end up at the National Construction Authority after that act was, the NCA Act was enacted. Of course, we have very many other laws that govern construction, including the Environmental Management Act, which is usually shortened as EMCA of 2015, sorry. And we have the Physical Planning Act, and we have the Engineers Registration Act, and very many others. Public Health Act also governs construction. We even have the Kenya Roads Act, which governs construction. So you can realize that despite the fact that I'm saying that we had consolidation of these laws into one, we still have so many others that still contribute towards the construction. Yes, accompanying acts.
Talking about all those acts, you've mentioned about the Environmental Act that also governs construction, the Public Health Act, as well as the Roads Act. Someone would want to know, like, we've seen buildings being constructed, maybe most of the times in the capital cities and in big cities. This construction, what is the process and rather the procedure of being able, for you to be able to be allowed to begin that construction?
Yes, I think I'll try and just summarize this.
Okay.
But basically, first of all, what you need And you notice that I didn't even mention the Surveys Act because that is where it all starts. So you have to go to the Survey of Kenya. And the reason why you go to the Survey of Kenya is so that they establish, that is the first process, so that they establish whether the particular land that you're building in, because any construction has to be built on a specific land. So they need to establish, is this land suitable for that kind of construction? Because of course we have issues such as planning, we have issues such as restrictions on building, riparian lands, all those things. So the first bit is to go to the surveys of Kenya, where they would look at it with this and give you issue with the survey plan that shows that you're allowed to build. Then you have to establish what we call an architectural plan, and that architectural plan is what you take together with the survey plan. You have to take that to whatever the county, the relevant county authority, that land office that you want to, county planning office that you want to construct. So those two plans, the survey plan and the architectural plan, are reviewed by the county. And of course, once they are happy with what you are doing, they will give you authorization to go ahead. But even before they give you that authorization, you have to pay a building permit fees, which is usually, currently it's capped at 1% of the construction amount. Then you have to take that together with the bill of quantities, together with the construction agreement, which has to be signed by both parties. You take all that and take it to the National Construction Authority. Now that National Construction Authority is what will give you. They will give you the right to proceed with the construction. Yeah.
And you've talked about the permits and the planning permits as well, being able to lead you to get to the next step of beginning that construction. But again, there is that mandate you mentioned about the construction authority. Now, while you are still undergoing to seek permission to get this construction approved, what is the mandate of those particular bodies, such as the construction authority?
Basically, what the National Construction Authority does is to regulate all aspects of building, such that they would regulate contract. They would authorize contractors and give them certificates to engage in that particular act. They would look at whether you have met all the requirements, including requirements related to authorities such as NEMA, because before you start building, one bit that I didn't tell you was you also need to get authority from NEMA, so that they need to do what we call an environmental impact assessment. But once all these authorities have performed their roles, they have looked at whether you have the right bill of quantities, whether you have met the relevant public health requirements. Now you take it to the National Construction Authority, which sits for me at an adjudicator's place. So they tell you, go and get all those authorizations from all those relevant bodies. Once you get all those authorizations, come to us. We will say you have met the requirements. We will look at whether the contractors that you're using are authorized. We will look at whether the bill of quantities are in order. So basically what they're doing is a supervisory role. That is the main role of the National Construction Authority, to supervise all buildings or all aspects of construction that anyone wants to engage in. And of course, one aspect about it is, apart from just supervising and ensuring that you have met the requirements at the beginning of construction, they also need to follow up and ensure that as the construction goes by, you are still complying with all these requirements. Because some people will get authorization that they have complied with the relevant public health requirements, and then once the construction starts, they forget about the requirements to continue complying, and now run rogue, right? So that's where again the National Construction Authority comes in, and that is why you'll find them supervising buildings all the time, even after they have given you the authority to proceed and construct.
Talking about giving you the authority and regulating you in every bit, do they apply that regarding the building that you are planning to construct? Because you understand, someone would be constructing a very big building, someone else constructing a small building. Does the law cut differently in such terms?
Perhaps the only time that I would say the requirements cut differently is when it comes to regulation of contractors, such that they would then classify contractors according to the different works that they are entitled to do or they are allowed to do. But other than that, when it comes to the process of beginning a construction, it doesn't really matter whether you're constructing a small house or whether you're constructing a huge building. What they do is they have to ensure that you have met the basic requirements. And the reason for that is because, when you look at, they're trying to control hazards, right? They're trying to control the danger that arises from construction. So if somebody is hurt by a falling object from a one-story building, it's likely that the injuries that they suffer would more or less be equal to those ones that somebody is hurt from, let's say, a seventh floor, right? Or if somebody, so the concept is to ensure that we have safe construction sites, and that we are complying with, we are constructing in a manner that also complies with environmental protection and all that. Because at the end of the day, when we have too much uncontrolled construction, you notice that it also has an impact in our environment. So the law does not cut differently when it comes to regulation of construction. The only thing that I would say, and I will repeat that, the only thing that I would think cuts differently is the level of contractors that are allowed to construct different aspects, because of course of the expertise needed. Perhaps the expertise needed to construct a 30-story building is not the same expertise needed to construct a maisonette or a bungalow somewhere, right? Yeah, so that is the only difference that I see from the regulations. Other than that, the process is the same.
And of course, having talked about that, there is that aspect as well where we find a building that has been constructed and has been approved by the construction authority, but once again you find that maybe a body like NEMA comes in and says this building was constructed illegally. At that point, now who is against the law? Because the building was approved by the construction authority, and NEMA, which again depends on the approval of the construction authority body, comes and says this building was built against our will, but it was approved by the National Construction Authority. So who is on the wrong in that regard?
What usually happens is sometimes a lot of approvals that are granted to developers are usually what I would say conditional. So you might find that NEMA comes and says you have to build within half an acre of your property, and that the rest is probably riparian land, or the rest is a road reserve, or that you have to face certain limits, or that your sewerage has to face a certain direction or get into the county sewerage plan in a certain way. Then they give their conditions and say if you don't meet that, then no need for approval. So when you go to the National Construction Authority, they approve based on the recommendations that NEMA has given, for example, because they are not experts in environmental management and conservation, right? So once it comes to once NEMA has done its job and forwarded that, you find that the NCA then proceeds to approve. You start your construction. Now, at that time that perhaps NEMA was giving you that authorization, if at the time that you're constructing, you fail to comply with those conditions, then NEMA will also, on its own volition, come and say, we have to inspect this building and find whether you're complying with the environmental impact assessment reports that we that we reviewed and approved, right? In the event that they don't find that you're complying, despite the fact that the NCA approved, right, in their own right and as an independent authority, they have the right to say, stop, you can't continue constructing because you're not complying with what we said, right? Because most of the time, what you will find is you will not find a situation where compliance is not, because if you've not complied from the onset, when you get to NCA, there is a likelihood that they will not approve your construction, right? Unless then you decide to engage in corrupt practices, and I'm not ruling out the chance or I'm not ruling out chances that we have some corrupt approvals that are obtained from NCA. But if the proper process is followed, most of the time, if you find either the Kenya, if you find Kenha or Kura or NEMA coming in and putting in a red light to that construction, then the reason for that is not because they didn't do their initial due diligence, but most of the time it's usually because there has been a problem after the approvals were gotten, that there is some sort of non-compliance to whatever approvals they gave or conditions that they gave with the approvals.
Someone would be asking themselves, we've seen, in ongoing construction buildings, some billboard erected right on the construction indicating there is a contractor, there is the engineer, the person, the architect, and all that. Why is it important to have that, and is it part of the regulations or rather the law?
So the issue of having boards outlining each and every one of those professionals is not just an issue of having names. Each of those professionals has their own role. One aspect about it is you will find that even the Registration of Architects and Quantity Surveyors Act provides that each and every construction in this company ought to have an architect on board. So they can, because they're the ones who draw the building, right? And they're the ones who set out how the final product will look like. They are the ones who have the vision of what it will look like. Then we have a quantity surveyor who draws the bill of quantities and says that if the architect wants to have this final product, it will cost us this amount to have that. It will cost us this quantity of materials to have that. It will cost us this number of bags of cement. And if you look at that board again, sometimes you see an engineer, right? Because the engineer then is saying that if you don't mix these quantities in this manner, then you run the risk of having that building collapse at the middle, right? Okay. On 10th floor, or 15th floor. So you must mix these quantities that the quantity surveyor has said in this manner and in these ratios before this building comes out in the manner that the architect has envisioned. And then we have a contractor. The contractor is the one who definitely ensures that that everything that the professionals have put in the books, because the professionals are basically writing opinions and telling you do this, do this, do this. Now that is implemented on the ground. That the way the engineer wants us to mix this has been done appropriately. The quantities that the quantity surveyor has prescribed have been complied with, and the manner in which the architect has envisioned this building has been complied with. So it's only after that that you're able to have your building up. But remember that also, like I say, that the National Construction Authority actually regulates contractors to ensure that they are well trained and that they have the sufficient knowledge to implement what has been done. So that in case a contractor, say, is not well trained, and I think they have an obligation to attend trainings within the year before they are given their next license. So in case a contractor is not well trained, then they are suspended from being able to implement that.
Now, and as we also come to conclusion of this important part of the law, there's that aspect of a contractor, or rather an engineer, going against the laws of construction. What happens if a contractor per se goes against the law of constructions?
Now we have three aspects about it, because I would say that contractors generally are regulated by the National Construction Authority, NCA, right? So in case you have an issue with the contractor, you report that to the NCA, and they have a dispute resolution committee that, you remember we had a conversation about mediation. Sometimes it comes in, and now they go through the processes and determine whether, and arbitration, and determine whether who among the parties is on the wrong, right? In case you have a complaint against an architect or a quantity surveyor, there is what we call BORAX. That is the Board for Registration of Architects and Quantity Surveyors. If you report them there, there is a chance that then they will be censured, or perhaps their license will be withdrawn. But before that happens, most of the time you'll find that most of those construction agreements provide that in case there is a dispute, then the same ought to be referred to arbitration. So that we would have a process of arbitration going on, and that will determine who among the parties is on the wrong. Because sometimes also it's actually the developer who is on the wrong. Perhaps they're not paying their bill, they're not paying the certificates on time, and then they will come and say that the building has delayed, yet perhaps after the quantity surveyor approved the certificates, they have not been paid. You'll find an architect sometimes saying, now we cannot continue with the building unless, with the construction, unless you pay us our money, right? So those are things that arise. In case there's a dispute, of course you can refer it to BORAX, but more often than not, they refer those disputes to arbitration. Unless it's an issue of what I would call professional, it's an issue of where
Misconduct.
yes, professional misconduct. Then in that case, BORAX has the right to investigate and perhaps withdraw the certificate that they have issued to this particular professional. In the event that it's an engineer who is not doing their work, there is a different board, that is the Engineers Registration Board, which looks at all those issues and definitely determines who is to blame within that.
And that, just on another question that is very important, that a building has been erected or rather constructed, and the government certifies that this building was illegally constructed against all regulations that should be followed. Is the government in a position to repossess such a building?
Yes, the government could be in a position to repossess those buildings, especially buildings that are constructed on government land. That if today you get some piece of land illegally and the government ascertains that that building is constructed on government land, they have every right to do that. Of course, what they will do is they have to give you what we call the right to be heard. And sometimes you have people rushing to the courts to prevent that because they feel that perhaps the government is not giving them the right to be heard, or they petition against the government's acquisition of such properties. But remember where I started by saying that you start the process by going to the Survey of Kenya, which has basically has a record of all parcels of land in this country. So by the time you get to a level where the government is repossessing your building, then there is a chance that a lot of irregularities have gone on through the whole process. Because the Survey of Kenya should be able to point out, this is government land, you can't construct here. Or if, say, a building has encroached to a road reserve, right? Then the government has the right to say that we are repossessing this building because it has encroached on road reserves, and then perhaps they would tell you that you need to demolish the part that has actually encroached on a road reserve. And the relevant authorities, Kenya included, do this more often than not. Yeah.
And as we conclude as well, there's so many misconceptions and also misunderstanding in regards to the construction laws. As a person who has, interacted with the regulations and the authorities as well, what would be your advice as we also conclude this particular episode?
What I would tell the viewer is, a lot of people want to engage in this aspect of construction on their own, right? Unfortunately, sometimes the amounts or the amounts that you incur for failing to engage professionals ends up even usurping the amounts that you will pay for professionals. So you find these people who say, I have been in the construction industry, or I've constructed very many buildings. I think, and that sometimes is a problem that befalls people the age of our parents, because long time in previous times people will say, I want to draw a house that looks like this. It will have a room here and another one here, and then they will say, because I know somebody who has constructed hundreds and hundreds of houses in the village, let me just engage them. They will come and get some young men in the village who will construct. So what I'm telling the viewer is, at the end of the day, when you don't want to engage professionals, you end up spending more than you would, because that is when you find NCA coming and drawing that big red X on your building saying you have not complied with the requirements, or you get yourself with structural defects. There's a building that you find that has that is leaning one direction and almost falling, or some walls are not very strong enough and develop cracks. So what I will tell the viewer is, engage professionals when you want to construct, right? And not just professionals in the construction industry. I would also say that even as lawyers, we're able to advise on the process of what you need to go through. So it's from a lawyer's perspective, what we do is mainly support. That we support you to get the best possible scenario for you to engage in construction, which again I said is a gray area for a lot of people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that is a good area to end this particular episode, hoping the viewer has been able to learn one or two, three things in regards to the constructions law. And thank you so much, Bruno Situma, for making time to come and elaborate this particular complex law that has so much to talk about, and we will also be trying to see whether we can talk about it more and more, because there's so much to inform the people. So thank you very much for making this time. And that has been Bruno Situma, is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, talking about the construction laws. And I hope you've been able to learn most of the things that you didn't know. And that is where we wind up this particular episode. My name is Chris Sambo. See you on the next episode on Know Your Laws. Goodbye.